Two sets of local conditions were talking one day, and one of them said, "You know what's fascinating in the distinction between my native reality and my native's artistic sense? Well, for instance, the creatures on one of my worlds, while producing a popular television series, brought on, one week, a rather dislikable character, played by a well-known, well-liked actor, just for a one-shot appearance. Then shortly thereafter, their lead actor died. And the consensus was that the ideal replacement would be the actor who had played the unfavorable character in the episode I just mentioned. So, what a dilemma they faced. To bring back on an actor so already identified with a negative persona and present him now as of leading man stature. So, what a dilemma, what to do. But no problem for the little ones. With the help of artistic license and the assistance of the audience's limited scope of knowledge and memory and awareness, they, with no introduction, explanation, or excuse, simply brought the actor and his character back on, now in the lead role, and voila, instant rehabilitation. Unbelievable, I tell you, absolutely and delightfully unbelievable." And the other set of local conditions shook his head, no, and said, "Forget your world of the arts and dig this. I've got creatures on one of my plants who do the same thing in real life." And the first set of local conditions then shook his head and said, "Collectively, up until now, men have used religion as the way to handle their evolutionary responsibilities." The man picked up his ringing phone and said, "Hello," and the voice on the other end asked, "Who is speaking, please?" And the man replied, "Fred Lumbar Regent." And the voice said, "Could you spell that, please?" And the man said, F-R, and the voice on the phone said, wait, F-R. And across town, it's a good thing there's no minimum speed limit on this particular information highway. All of you people would be ticketed. And across town, another man wrote his mother and said, "Mom, is it just me, or are most famous people pretty pathetic?" And no viewers wrote in about either one of these, so we now move on humanely to the next page. The philosophy of one ancient people went thusly: "It is as pleasurable to be hungry as fed, to be tired as rested, to be agitated as at peace. This is either true to the mind and the body knows it not, or else it is the other way about and we recognize it not." "Daddy," said the boy, tugging at the elder's cuff, "that does not, to me, sound like the sort of philosophy one would want to screw around with." Civilization, as played out in some places, is the transplanting of Wilson Piggott's head on the body of Bach. There is a certain kind of pretentious seriousness that, when introduced into a living adventure, becomes like the permanent creases in a folded map, distorting, even obliterating certain destinations drawn thereon. A mother told the child on the day the young one was to first move to the city, "Double check that you're taking all of the necessary tools with you that are required for a minimal existence over there. Be sure you have a clock, something to make notes on, some money, and something to make notes on, suitable clothing, and something to make notes on." And the offspring interrupted and said, "No need to keep mentioning something to make notes on. I'm taking along my mind's spare time." On a world away, the people have abandoned the triadic conception of time, that is, into the past, present, and future, and condensed it into a division of two: the present and all that other shit. In the crowd, a man raised a placard that said, "The extroverts and materialists will rule the world," and there was no one present to object. The King's Director of Housing and Social Entanglements presented his most recent findings. Dangerous people always come from another country, while the merely stupid can come from just around the corner. His Grace thanked him for the report, then, sensing the beginning of a severe headache, retired to the garden for a private walk. Those in real estate love to say that the three most important things about a piece of property are location, location, and location, an idea they pilfered from the significance of where, precisely, the seat of consciousness is in a man's own nervous system. To challenge his son, one father said to him, "Think on it in this manner. Take any word you want to, and you can look it up in the dictionary." One guy nicknamed the area where his upper hormonal operations met his lower neural ones as the pertinent rascal. After the main dinner was completed, the guest retired to the library where cordials were served, along with this comment from the butler: "When hormones are tickled in a certain kind of way, what else can the mind do but smile?" Criminology update. Ground floor burglars seem dreary and indifferent, while second-story jewel thieves appear spry and happy in their work. Geological bulletin. One man called that area of his intellect that he so profitably worked his metaphor mine. The knight said to the royal priests as they stood looking down at the people of the village, "Even among the non-religious, they still embrace their I as a kind of God." In a town meeting, a man stood and said, "In my personal view, I don't think that civilization is all that bad." And across the room, another man leaped to his feet, pointed an accusatory finger at the speaker, and declared, "Aha! Civilization paid you to say that." A man paused and pondered. Why, historically, amidst all metaphorical thought, is it assumed that from the one comes many? Why could it not be that from the many comes the many and everything else? One man's philosophy. Anyone who wants to be admired should be laughed at. His brother says pitied, but since he's the larger of the two, laughed at prevails. For the problems and questions of human existence, there are no correct or incorrect solutions and answers until you say that there are. The Way Things Work, part 6749 at least. The more important are taken to be the concoctions of man's mind, the more important they become. Optics, expanded and optimized. A boy asked his father, "Since the pupils of our eyes expand in reaction to our interest in the things seen, why not likewise with our minds?" Corollary for civilized urbanites. Maps too pliable result in reality too unreliable. Those whose individual sense of identity is based on that of some collectives have, in fact, no true sense of individual identity. Premise: a sick man's in no hurry. Now consider that sick means more than ill, and that man represents no less than consciousness. A good PR tip for city personas. If you're posing for publicity photos and you're dumb, look real serious. One man told his mind, "If you can't be original, keep quiet." And it replied, "Don't tell me, tell your tongue." You political science majors and diminished might care to note that this is one of the 5 prime reasons that many kingdoms fall apart, especially when several of them are located in the volatile multicultural region just north of your neck. One chap's recent peer into the psychological depths of Homo sapiens is this: the ever-shifting interplay in man of contrasting and conflicting emotions is like an elaborate set of elephant furniture, and no viewer wrote in about this one either. More cliches steam cleaned and hung out to dry. What goes round doesn't come round unless you let it get you down first time round. To wit, el exemplior, Some men feel good by pushing inanimate objects around. Some mountains, men. One of the really tricky parts of being a mystical knight is that no outside voice calls you to do it, nor offers much in the way of assistance. Daddy, is that why drugstore warriors are still on the stools? Conclusion to be drawn. Cream puffs and over-the-counter medications look after their own. The people stopped and gathered round as their local philosopher began to speak. A man who lives a life not continually reflected on has lived but half a life. And someone asked, but if a man never makes any initial attempt to reflect on his existence, how will he ever know of his error? And the wise one smiled, tugged at his toga and replied, I see we have a bookmaker in the house. The more alert need not be concerned over the possibility of Bruno being questioned by the church or Socrates by the Foex Populi. For the fact is that if a man who knows stoops so low as to respond to the questioning of the Philistines, he has become one himself anyway. At an early stage in the earthly game, men decided that if reality was going to be kicking asses and taking names, they'd just simply redefine what was reality. Apparent success, a poem. One man moved the clock from his bed, but couldn't remove the one from his head. There is local time and universal time, cellular time and organism time, components time and systemic time, hormonal time and the neural variety. Hey honey, the game's coming on. While you're up, would you hand me another way of thinking about it? A viewer writes, I believe I figured out why it's hard to listen to you. It's because it's difficult to either agree or disagree with most of what you have to say. The king, in a drunken rage of lucidity, said to the court, I too am a shill for fate, but at least I admit it. The most recent results of one man's investigation of the elusive linkage between man's invented verbal world and the natural silent one summarizes he. If you place the letter N up against your wall and turn it just right, sort of at an angle, it'll look just like a roach or maybe a praying mantis. A viewer writes, regarding an item you read on your last show about a man who had the tattoo that read, a serious man is a goddamned pathetic man, and next to it had surgically implanted a small mirror, well, I'd just like to tell you, I don't need a mirror, I have ears, and they're precisely tuned to station WHINE. Thanks anyway, yours, etc. One man's urban survival slogan, the humble, honest, and honorable will prevail, but no more often than will the arrogant, deceitful, and disreputable. Certain city health news, a sick man's a happy man. You could conceive of several levels of the evolution of civilization, from the beast to man, from man's beastly deities to his human ones, and ultimately from man to future man. A viewer writes, I cannot, by the by, see metaphor as being an acceptable substitute for clear understanding. My older brother says he can't see metaphor as being an acceptable substitute for anything. And my younger brother says he can't see life as being anything but a metaphor. The debate. Adjectives are for children. What kind of children? Real young children. One ET's photographer's posing advice. Look tough, be tough. Be stupid, look stupid. One man who was interested in such matters one day thought, do I perchance do a disservice and add to the confusion by continuing to use the word transcendental? For is such really the rationally expected aim of effort such as this? Do we expect a microscope to ever see beyond the periphery of its lens? Or a voltmeter to ever register anything other than electrical current? Then why is it that we presuppose so much more possible for the human mind than things merely mental and most human? Then there was this other chap who says that he has undergone some slight sort of initiatory shock upon learning that the gods of the insane are different from those of everyone else. Those who say that the experience can't possibly be either this or that have never had the experience. And those who say that it is either this or that haven't either. Corollary, those who shout, "It's only over here," belong over there. And from a viewer comes our TV watcher's inspirational thought for the day. He says that watching reporters report the news is like watching shit trying to climb back up somebody's ass. Psychological sophisms as geometric faux pas. The beginning of all mental ills is the belief that all circles have a center. Liberation produces ever greater liberation. In the true inner mythical kingdoms, there is no such animal as a civilized knight. A viewer writes, "This experience you keep trying to describe sounds to me like little more than just another form of a feel-good philosophy." Close, sir, just delete the word philosophy. On his own, one guy seems to have updated a piece of proverbial adaging. Notes he, "The meek and reserved may not actually be better than the rest of us, but at least they don't generally yammer on about themselves as much as everyone else does." An unorthodox schematic for unruly, unregistered students. No matter what else it is, reality at local levels is at least these three things. It is itself, that is reality. It is the reflection of reality. And it is the shadow of reality. One guy's parting shot to a super-wired friend. If there is a supernatural force extrinsic to man, then it's in you. Midst extreme promise and excitement do the routine dream that they are born. Mere debris on seas of no importance, they imagine they depart. Daddy, why the hell don't men snap out of it? I believe, my boy, that what you mean to ask is when. Should not the stories of knights on the mystical quest having to overcome dragons along the way, and the fact that dragons do not exist, tell you something about the nature of the forces apparently opposing man? As a kind of planting and harvesting test, a certain farmer so quizzed his son, "Which would you prefer, to fall into a combine or have a nice butter sandwich? And if neither of those, then to either hear a symphony or listen to political commentary." The morality of mentation. The alert owe no fidelity to any particular idea. This being that all ideas are man-made and not the same as the truth. New definition thereof, the truth, the purpose of human existence. The businessmen and scientists who run the city see no benefit in a thing that cannot be bought or sold or tinkered with for grants. The royal jester told some people at the village pub one Saturday night, "The king still doesn't get it. He doesn't understand I'm not laughing at him. I'm trying to knock some sense into him." One stand-up kind of guys, stand-up kind of recitation. Two roads diverged in a system, and I tried to take them both. And that has made active in me all that you see here before you today. The never enunciated fallback religious hope of the intellectually challenged. The gods won't rain on the pea-brained. And local conditions sighed, "Ah, sweet Athena, were it but that simple, and that it could so be described." How real progress can move in directions that eludes all ordinary sight. Life told reality. If you think you're something, just wait till you see local conditions. Then told local conditions, if you think you're something, just wait till you see man. then told man, if you think you're something, just wait till you see future man. And beyond that point, what have you heard life say to you? Those who ask, am I all right, are not all right, and shortly resort to heroes and plagiarism. If the grand adventure is about freedom, then ponder, is it a neural freedom or a total inner freedom? None but the extraordinarily dense have an extraordinarily high opinion of themselves, and none but the ordinarily dense have any opinion of themselves. The reporter's first question to the head of the church was, what would you do if you were in a coma? Time for a brief, though blunt definition. A mystic. Mutant without portfolio. A man suddenly realized if reality could be actually put in words, then dictionaries wouldn't keep growing. Peering into life's oblique future may be found past days of earthly justice wherein chickens could order buckets of kernels to go. Update regarding the psychological basis of thought. Thought has no psychological basis. In the true mystical sense, a good map doesn't take you anywhere in particular. It just makes you want to travel. Life stopped the guy and said, hey, can I ask you a question? The guy replied, hey, you're alive. You can do anything you want to do. Everybody's got to do what they've got to do, but the more conscious don't comment on it. UFOs reoed. Coming from a different genetic swirl might as well bring you from another world. But still, the more conscious wouldn't comment on it. A couple of things from last time when I was again pointing a finger in the direction of the whole area of what some seem to find the problem of getting a grasp of what this is about being no new story, and I took a negative approach, which had been done before, but said that it would be a prime living example, contemporary one, if you want to see what this is not. Not us here, but what it is in reality inside of whoever's doing it. If you want to see what this kind of thing is not, would be look at any average soap opera. And I hit some of the high spots. Consider how much use they make, even though they're speaking here in the 1990s in the Western world, the United States, that these things running 5 days a week, an hour a day, that they have to really churn it out. And I simply was pointing out how much of the internal dialogue they make verbal, and pointing out how much of a filler that was, if nothing else, assuming that it's not great historical literature, drama, but how much use they make of people talking about their emotions, the inner dialogue, that all the actor's got to do is stand there and he can kill several minutes after whatever scene just happened, that the woman walks out of the room and says, well, you have cheated on me for the last time and lied to me. I don't know who you think you are. I should have never come back to you. After 10 years of a separation, you have not changed a bit. And she goes out. And the camera just gets on him and he goes, after 10 years of being separated, did I come back to hear her just say that kind of thing and walk out the door and slam it? For her to tell me that I haven't changed at all when I believe I've changed some. In other words, almost rehash what was just said, but now it apparently is an inner dialogue. That takes room, takes up time. They also do one that I wanted to point out. I was giving them credit last time in a sense of saying that they do not even have the ordinary pleasure of being able to do reruns like most serialized programs on the air do. That They don't run year round, as I assume everyone knows, and they'll do reruns if they just have a bad weekend, I guess, or a show doesn't come out. They like to flash up these things like, by popular demand, what do they call them? A non-core performance of one of your favorite shows. No, it meant was they couldn't. Production crew fell in a ditch or got drunk, or something happened, and so it's a rerun. We all know that. But as far as I know, they don't ever do reruns per se on the soap operas. But what do they do? Which is getting real close to the psychological inner aspect, is they are hell on wheels on fishbacks. That's flashbacks. They don't actually rerun a show, but the woman goes out and slams the door. He repeats just what she just said, just change a little bit. He keeps repeating almost as a rhetorical question. Did she actually? And he just stand there. And of course, he's already done the voiceover, and they're doing that. So he's standing there, and he almost replays the last 2 minutes, but as a rhetorical question, did she just walk out? Did she just say that I haven't changed after 10 years? Did she say that she was sorry she came back to see me? Of course, he drags out even more. Does she really think that I'm just the same old person I was? Is this a dream? Is this happening to me? So they drag that out. So they've taken one piece of dialogue that she said, a monologue, whatever it took 30 seconds, and now it's turned it into a minute. Then they will dig up something from I don't know when, a week back or months back, and they will, not a rerun of a show, but a flashback that's already been filmed of something went on them before. That seems to be connected, just any kind of conflict they had or something, some previous show where she was accusing him, or somebody was, but maybe her accusing him of being the kind of person that never changes and has a horrible temper, and so they pull back out 2 or 3 minutes. You understand? And of course, you people understand we're not talking about soap operas, but why there's a great thing is look at your damn memory in your brain. Why soap operas survive, and from one just quiet, valid view with no importance, they are terrible drama. Horrible writing, and we can all make excuses about how much they got produced. All right, but you understand, we're not talking about that. Why are they popular? Because they do reflect most people's mentation. What do you engage in? What does the mind normally engage in? We're talking about reruns, and if you think reruns, if you think, nah, I'm trying to get over that. I try not to keep fighting yesterday's battles and suffering over yesterday's heartbreaks. But then if we could take your mind and flash it up and went, well, you have improved, then I'd have to say, but wait a minute, you certainly are slipping in your own share of fishbacks. You go, wow. And you'd even talk to yourself. If we could go any further with this, you'd go, wait a minute, does he see something I don't? Or does he really say that I'm flashing by? They are a beautiful example because it is horrible. Again, I don't mean this as any kind of irrelevant, but from a view of serious drama, it's horrible. Bad theater, bad drama, it has done too fast, and etc. It turned out it's just pot boilers and make Dickens at his worst look like Shakespeare. We can say all that and then say, but isn't it great because it is just a kind of a point blank, getting very close to point blank reflection of average consciousness. Horribly acted, people talking about their feelings to no avail, to the point of almost fatal, or at least morbific tediousness. That if you look at it in a certain way, you think, God, they're making me sick. They just go on and on. Either leave the woman or shut up, quit bitching about her, just leave her. And you can sit there and be doing that and listen to this guy keep talking about, well, are you sure you love me? Why do you treat me? And I just think a guy, it doesn't matter, but a position, the guy could be looking at this and say, the guy's homesick. He doesn't see soap operas much. And he thinks, my wife, women watch this stuff all day. And he thinks, why don't that guy shut up? Hit her in the mouth or leave her, tell her to get lost. And, do something, but don't just sit there and whine and talk and talk. Honey, would you bring me something out of the kitchen? And if anyone thinks I was actually picking on soap operas, think about country and western music. And some more, well, Doing an internal soap opera debate as to whether to pick up any more of the example I was using on political and social questions being misnamed. You recall from last time, the gun control. I think I'm going to drop it just to remind you one more time that in the civilized world, anything that's alive that becomes an organization, it could be the church, it can be traffic court, it can be proposed legislation, it can be whatever a prevailing popular social attitude like the need for gun control. It can be anything. It can be apparently a solid organization like a church, the church, a religion, a particular religion, a legislative body, a particular one, or just the judicial or just the legislative process. It can be all of those things. It can be apparently either goods and services, either goods or services. It can be apparently a noun or a verb. But if it stays alive long enough to be of any interest to be discussed, it will outlive what its original name was. It will no longer be fulfilling that which, by at least half the people's agreement half the time, it will no longer be fulfilling, or perhaps even apparently attempting to fulfill, its proposed, originally stated aim, which will stay with it. Which is Coleridge, that's where he got his idea about the big black dead bird hanging around your neck. That it will stay with you forever. That once something is named, they cannot shake it completely. They can try to modify it, is how they come up with things like the reformed so-and-so, the reformed Albanian legislature, the reformed such and such church. But they can never shake. It is like being born in a certain way, that you're born you're born a certain color. And after that you could change the shape of your nose, to change your ears, you could cut your hair, you could have liposuction. You cannot change what you were genetically. If you're born one sex, I know they play around with it. I don't even go into that. There's a part of you cannot change. And in that same way, it starts out that psychiatry, politics, government itself, religion, somewhere in the hoary past it says our purpose is such and such. If it stays alive, they get further and further from being able or even attempting to fulfill that purpose. But they can never just stop and go, wait a minute, this has gone too far, we have outlived the name. That's no longer our purpose, let's just drop it, let's face the facts, let's call ourselves what we are. Well, they could, but what they'd be hollering, it would only take a second. They would say, we're no longer so-and-so, we are, and the word you'd have to listen close, what they'd holler is, suicidal, because that's the last you'd hear of them. If you absolutely tried to change, if the church said, well, listen, this has gone far enough, we didn't plan it this way, it wasn't a conspiracy or a traffic court, that we didn't start off this way, but it's no longer a court, this is a tax office. Forget justice, forget all the judges and all this. It'd be boom. You go in the next day and it would not be there. They would have taken out all the trappings of a court and it'd now just be a regular bureaucratic office. Nobody even talked about it. It's like, well, it was a bad dream, just something, it got all askewed. So they cannot drop the original name. It is with them to some degree forever. Would anyone like to take any connection between that and what I was saying about genetically, you cannot actually change your sex or your race or... Nowadays, that's about it, isn't it? In fact, sex is getting iffy. The reason I was pausing, if you want to think a second, even 10 or 15 years ago, I could have made all kinds of examples. Like, so, well, you can't change your height. And nowadays you can. I assume you people know it, that there's surgery going on now, that they are lowering and upping people's height by doing operations I'm sure many of us don't want to think about unless you like the fingernails on the blackboard, of them chopping up your calf bones or your femurs and adding and subtracting like playing blocks. So, and even your general physical, They used to call it type, but nowadays they're doing such things with plastic surgery that they can almost, there's very few things left. That was a little aside for you to think about also, of how malleable man is. But back to what I was going to say, if you'd consider, assuming you followed that human institutions, the inventions of man, such as a religion or psychiatry or education, the police arm of government, anything out there in life, if you say, wait a minute, they are no longer doing that. Anybody you want to pick on, the arts, religion. No, they're not doing exactly what they say. They may be far from what they say the purpose was historically. But they cannot shake it. I assume you understand that. Let's assume that you say, well, I can see that. People do not apply that to the human individual, nor should they. Because then they would be stuck with what they would want to say is, wait a minute, they'd be back to this, wait a minute, you're saying we can't do anything. You're just saying that's all fatalistic, that we're all stuck here. We're all stuck as we are. And there is nothing to say once someone brings up that question, or once someone even rhetorically makes that conclusion that, well, that's all you're saying. Consider, I'm going to leave it, consider that you've got the situation, I'll do it out here to start with, like all these institutions, all the invented institutions and activities of man, that once they are named and they become part of the living, organic side of human life, they cannot in any real meaningful way ever shake the original name, the original purpose that they had. If they do, they disappear. There is no real reorganization, there is no real reform of anything that's been alive and is now an integral part of civilization, of man's invented world. That's what I was doing this out there. There is the same situation in here, in a man. Not knowing that, would you like to make up your own equation? Not knowing that equates with, and I'll move on and you can just fill it in for the rest of your life. Just look around. Not knowing this produces, and the insinuation, of course, or the insinuation I intend is that what it produces is not necessarily should go in the profit column of your ledger book. It is not necessarily a useful expenditure of one's time and energy. Is that all? Well, it's also tied to several of these I pulled out. That's still close to last time and what we were just talking about. That it ends up with people saying, sane, reasonable minds would want to say, then all of this would lead a man to believe that there is nothing that can be done. Now the so-called, the apparent problems, the apparent questions of humanity have no solutions or answers, either right or wrong, until someone says they do. And after that, there's nothing else can be said that's of any value whatsoever to someone attempting to be more aware of life. Because once the decision has been made, once an answer, once a response, once a solution has been proffered to that question of, well, can something be done? That's why I've drug up the example last time of the gun control or many other things I could have used. But you should be good enough now to see that it doesn't matter the example. I just use the example because that was one that's rather wired up right now and I thought would get your attention. The question of violence seems to be a brand new one. Everybody rediscovers it, every generation that's trying to run for office. That beyond the specific example of such thing as gun control is the human mind being left with this. Once you push it up to the kind of areas that I try to encourage you to do on these nights, to push it up on the area like, my head's about to hit a wall. I'm about to get a severe headache. I'm getting, in a way, confused. That I'm even confused about what particular way I'm confused. But it's to the point that it sounds like that there's nothing can be done, that things are just as they are. Is that all you're saying? It's too late. Those of you keeping score, between the last time we met and tonight, I've surely done that 5 or 6 times now. Said that same thing in case you're keeping score and wondering if I'm aware of it. There are, to the apparent, problems and questions, look at it either way, of man's existence. There are no proper answers or solutions. They're not proper or improper until someone asks about them, or even rhetorically comments on them. This it is a extremely strange place. I bet science fiction has some kind of name that I should be able to pull up, but it's like some kind of black hole vortex over right where reality converges with non-reality. Check your science fiction book somewhere. It is something that strange because it is to the point that it would sound as though if a man had even a passing philosophical interest in the nature of life and he heard this kind of conversation, he might lend it an ear and go, well, that's interesting. I used to think about stuff like that sometimes, but where are you going? What's your point? What are you going to say? What philosophy is this? And if I tried to put them off, they would then be left with wanting to come to this conclusion of, well, wait. It sometimes sounds as though you're just saying that there's nothing can be done. If there's nothing to be done, why are you even doing this, or why would people even listening? Are you saying that nothing that happens in life is a problem? Are you saying that nothing that happens in life is untoward? You can't ask that. You can't ask that and expect to understand anything, because if you ask that, there is then no correct or incorrect answer. No matter how intelligent you are, no matter how well-meaning you are, no matter how, in fact, perhaps academically versed in philosophy or logic, you cannot ask. And I don't mean me. You cannot ask. That is, you cannot fall into that kind of neural energy flow. God, that sounds occult and New Age. You cannot ask such questions of yourself. You cannot participate in such questions and expect anything except answers that are neither correct nor incorrect. But those of you who do not care for nice butter sandwiches, I guess could turn it around and say, well, it could be worse or it could be better. It could either be that some answer is correct or incorrect, or maybe what you said was correct. And maybe that's the best way, that's not either correct or incorrect. No, the last part wouldn't go. Not with ordinary butter sandwich eaters. That's when they have to go outside and take a private walk. That's when they thank God for the remote. If you get any grasp of the reality of what I'm saying, you understand why there are no arguments to prove or disprove or even insinuate to the ordinary mind if life's all right as it is or not. And if it's not, what can we do about it? Or maybe we can't do anything about it. Try another hint. And don't check your notes and wonder whether I've said this before. Not exactly. I know close. Why is it that if we're going to play this little game again, of the creatures on this planet, if we looked at any that genetically, chimpanzees, dogs, even insurance salesmen, those closest to the human level, if they cannot speak, if they are lacking that kind of intellect that can speak, why is it that they find no fault with life? That between us and chimpanzees there's only one difference, operationally. That we have a cortical intellect, we can speak, we can think. If that's the only difference then if you're going to play any, even high school logic, then does that not give you some suspicion as to, back to the question I was presenting, we are the only creature that you know of that has any complaint with life, that finds any fault with life, with ourselves. Of course, we distinguish between life and ourselves, like sometimes it may be our fault, but sometimes it's life's fault. That is other people. So that's why I was giving you a choice. We're the only creatures that find any fault with life, that question at all our behavior, question at all life's behavior. We're the only ones. And the only difference between us and our closest neighbor, chimpanzees, let's say, is that we can think. What sort of boy and girl genius does it take to begin to suspect something? Except for this, I played my little theatrical smartass part there for a second. Even if I got some ordinary people who went, aha, I see what you mean. Wouldn't do them any good. Because I said, well, very good. I'm glad that you came here. That's my kind of audience. What'd you get out of that? They have no idea. If you get any grasp of that, then we're back to my comment that all of these so-called problems and questions of life have no correct or incorrect answers or solutions until you ask about them, until you comment about them. Then the part, of course, for the grown-ups is, and then it's too late. But once you ask about it, there is nothing else to be said. Try it again. Now, you've been stuck in a ditch before, and it's not even snowing. So. Looked at in the broadest possible sense, not just because I bring up the subject and was using the words, and not just because philosophy technically has dealt with this. All of humanity. They do it all the way from sports to country and western music, to soap operas, to cartoons, to family relationships, to everything having to do with man's invented world. Comes down to this question, whether put this way or not, is do we have any freedom of will? Is there anything we can do about what the hell's going on? And it does not plague an ordinary man's mind, much less his soul, in a way that debilitates him. But you are continually, an ordinary man who never would think about this is continually faced with this. It is a part of the problem of him dancing with his individual partners, his wife, his family, his husband, her husband, society. Is that part of the time it seems like that people are responsible. And the old, if you want to call it a joke, is like, I believe in freedom of will for everybody else. That is, everybody else is responsible for what they do. How dare them, cheat me like that? And somebody says later, did you realize you cheated me? And you think, well, you're neurotic. I never cheated you. And if they caught you, and you had to admit, well, you're right, I did, but I couldn't help it. It's like a neuroses I have. It's like a psychological ED fix that anything I see that's not nailed down, if it stays in one place for longer than 30 seconds, I got to take it. In other words, I got no freedom of will. I'm being silly, but right to the point, you understand, that the ordinary mind wants to say, I have no freedom of will under certain conditions, which I can explain. Years past, you explained it religiously. Now you got Freud and Jung and everybody else behind you. That, wait a minute, I can tell you. But you do not, that's the way life is, you do not want to give that sort of credit to other people. Well, wait a minute, don't give me that psycho-babble. You're responsible. You lied to me, you cheated me. What I'm trying to get you to consider is back to everybody is operationally confronted with, is there any way we can change, is there any chance we can change life or not? Is there anything such thing as freedom of will? Are we absolutely locked into a closed system? Are we genetically bred to do a certain thing? Can we not escape the armor of what we seem to be? Whether you ever say that or not, that is the ping in everyone's engine. keeps everyone alert. It keeps everyone conscious, and it makes everyone feel that they are slightly suffering from burrs in their saddle. And notice, humans also seem to be, well, they are the only ones that fight in a certain way, but much of their warfare, much of their interspecies hostility seems to be on non-survival, non-physical bases, such as philosophical arguments, warfare apparently over religion, over politics, over economic system, apparently. So what they're dealing with there would also seem to be, can we make change, if necessary, forcefully, that we will make this group of people, or I'll make the kind of people here in my own neighborhood, my own kingdom, my neighbors, I will make them submit to a new kind of thinking, a new kind of religious thinking, political thinking, etc. Can it be done? And people want to say, part of them will want to say, well, yes, it can be done. It again, operation becomes a one-way street, that nobody can do it to you, and you want to do it to somebody else. You believe that it's possible, or that it historically has been done to someone else, which is one reason that makes warfare such a popular topic of history. Nobody's ever analyzed it that way, but it's because apparently you can change fate. Classic example being the metaphorical picture of Muhammad and his sword with an unsuspecting group of people who've never heard of him before, and he says, I would like for you to become a Muslim. And they go, well, screw you, Charlie. And suddenly there's this sword. And it's surprising how many of them would almost immediately go, well, praise the Lord, or whatever. You know, Southern Baptist, recruited Muslims, and they go, well, nobody presented it to me that way. I see what you mean. Praise be to Allah. All of it being a question of whether man can change. Stalling it down to the last minute. Try to slip in the punchline. It all seems to be a question of, can man change? Look at what's wrong with life, and something must be done. And remember what I was sort of leading up to the end here. Man is the only creature at all that shows any sign of having any complaint with life. The rest of it should be obvious. You cannot see any creature, all the way from the sentient down to trees. You can't find any form of life on this planet that shows anything that a sane man could interpret in any way as being a complaint. You do not see a hippo walk up, or a rhino, or a lion walk up to another kind of animal that it, maybe smells bad, like a, banker or something. Anyway, something that's not its normal food supply. You do not see animals that are about to eat another animal. You go up and make some kind of smell, and then that in any way that you can interpret that, they look around and go, boy, what's life doing? What's wrong with this place? What's this forest coming to? If it is not part of their bio survival agenda, they simply walk off. You can't see anything. No zoologist, no biologist, no one, no sane person has ever looked upon anything but man's existence and seen any sign of any creature, be it mobile or not, all the way from a petunia to a panther, that showed any sign of going, boy, if I could talk, I'd have something to say about what the hell's going on. They don't show the least sign. You only have man. You only have man, and he can think. Now back to, when man thinks, what does he think about? And save yourself the time watching the soap opera. Watch your own soap opera inside. What does man think about? You primarily think about you and man collectively, which is part of the collective progress, but you think of the problems, the questions. It's just the same thing, but problems and questions. Back to I comment. The problems, the questions of life have no correct or incorrect solutions or answers until you ask about them. It is the greatest, in a sense, from a few people's view, it is the greatest safety device possible. It is the world's greatest. It is the only fail-safe burglar alarm. It is the only fallback position that will fall forward, sideways, and on anybody gets in the way. Do it again. In man's life, to the problems and questions. No exemptions from the problems, for the problems and the questions. There are no correct or incorrect solutions or answers. So I didn't say there are not any. And I didn't say there aren't any good ones. I didn't say there aren't any easy ones. I didn't say there aren't any correct ones. I didn't say there aren't any correct ones, any incorrect ones. I said there aren't any correct or incorrect until you ask. And then after you ask, you got both. You got both. And so after that, what do you expect? Did you go, well, how come we can't ever decide what to do next? It's too late to decide what to do. We got any tape?
Yes.
All right. Nah, it won't get any better. I mean, from you. That was it.